Last year, 88 massively profitable corporations paid exactly $0 in federal income tax.
Yeah, zero. It's pretty wild.
I mean, we are talking about massive companies, Tesla, Halliburton, Citigroup. And today, we are looking at how a single 60-second burst of frustration on the House floor tried to blow the lid off that statistic.
Right, and this happened right before Congress descended into this multi-trillion-dollar gridlock over the very boundaries of our country.
Exactly. So, welcome to Congress in Context. Since you shared this huge stack of daily proceedings with us, you asked us to do a special focus for you today on this deep dive.
We really wanted to get into the weeds on this one.
We did. So we are taking the raw congressional record from Wednesday, April 29, 2026, and we're breaking down the hidden mechanics of what actually happened on the floor.
And because this record is entirely unfiltered, we really need to state right up front that today's source material contains some highly charged political rhetoric.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so we will be quoting arguments regarding the Trump administration, May GA, and progressive policies from both left-wing and right-wing lawmakers.
Okay.
But we are not taking sides here.
Right. Definitely not endorsing any of these viewpoints.
Exactly. Our strictly analytical goal is to unpack the arguments and the legislative mechanics, exactly as they appear in the record you sent us.
Okay, so let's unpack this. It is 9 a.m. in the House of Representatives.
Bright and early.
Right. And the chaplain opens the day with a quote from King Charles III. He says, light has triumphed over darkness.
A nice sentiment to start the day.
Yeah, but then immediately the chamber moves into what they call 1-minute speeches.
Right, those rapid-fire moments.
Yeah, it's like, it's basically the coming attractions at a movie theater. Just a quick, often emotional preview of what actually matters to everyday citizens before the massive bureaucratic feature presentation begins.
That's a great way to look at it.
And this is where Rhode Island Representative Steph Magaziner gets up. He drops that statistic about the 88 corporations paying zero in taxes, using his 60 seconds to just demand an end to congressional stock trading.
And then literally right after that, North Carolina Representative Don Davis completely pivots to this tragic local story, but one with massive federal implications.
Oh, this was a tough one to read.
It really was. He brings up a man named Brent Wilson, who is the son of a career Marine. So Wilson grew up on Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune.
Right.
And at 39 years old, he developed advanced kidney cancer from toxic exposure at the base. I mean, the treatment saved his life, but they left him with permanent brain damage.
Which is just devastating.
Yeah. So Representative Davis uses his minute to warn that the Camp Lejeune Justice Act's 2-year filing window for victims is it's rapidly running out.
But, if I'm a victim's family listening to this, I really have to wonder about the utility here. Well, does a 60-second speech on a mostly empty warning floor actually change a rigid legal deadline? Like, it feels like it's just performative theater so the representative can, I don't know, click the video for social media and say they tried?
Well, it's easy to write it off as theater, sure. But mechanically, the congressional record functions as a foundational legal and legislative baseline.
Oh, so it has an actual function.
Exactly. By speaking Brent Wilson's name on the floor, Representative Davis is formally introducing that ticking clock into the parliamentary record.
See.
Yeah. So when a committee chair eventually wants to bundle an extension into a future veterans package, they use these floor speeches to basically bypass the preliminary discovery phase.
Right. They can just point to the record and say, look, this is already a documented pressing crisis across multiple districts.
Exactly. It's planting a very specific procedural flag to justify future spending.
That makes a lot of sense. And interspersed with these national crises are just purely local flags.
Oh, yeah. You see a lot of those.
Like Representative John Rose of Tennessee. He takes his minute to praise the Pope St. John Paul II preparatory school boys basketball team.
Right, for being the runner-up in their state championship.
Yeah. And then Representative Jim Baird of Indiana highlights the Pointer family, who won the 2025 Farm Family of the Year award.
And what caught my eye there was the detail about the drones.
Oh, yes. 2 members of the family got their FAA drone licenses so that they could do their own fungicide applications over, 5,000 acres of soybeans.
Which is fascinating, right? Because the theme that emerges right at the start of the day is this incredible contrast.
Yeah, the juxtaposition is wild.
You have hyper-local pride, a Tennessee basketball team sitting right next to federal aviation regulations for farming, corporate tax loopholes, and military toxic exposure.
All within, 10 minutes.
Exactly.
What?
The central tension driving this specific day in Congress is the constant tug of war between local community control and these massive overriding federal systems.
And that tug-of-war snaps right into focus with Representative Rashida Tlaib's one-minute speech.
Yes, it does.
She issues this really blunt warning that the federal government is illegally spying on citizens without warrants.
Which tees up the first major piece of legislation for the day, which is S. 1318, the Foreign Intelligence Accountability Act.
Right, so what is the core of this bill?
Well, this bill is entirely about reauthorizing FISA Section 702 for another 3 years. Mechanically, Section 702 allows U.S. intelligence agencies to target foreign nationals located overseas without going to a judge for a traditional warrant.
Okay, but what's the issue? That sounds like foreign intelligence.
The structural problem and the reason it is so controversial is what they call incidental collection.
Right, when Americans get caught up in it.
Exactly. If an American citizen is texting or emailing one of those foreign targets, the American's data gets swept up into this massive national security database.
And Representative Austin Scott, who is pushing hard for this bill, he argues this is the only way to stop foreign terror attacks fast enough.
Yes, and he drops a pretty huge statistic to try and prove the system has been fixed.
Right, he points to the 2024 Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act, FISA.
Exactly. He says that because of the 56 mandatory FBI reforms in that 2024 Act, the FBI's queries on U.S. citizens plummeted.
And the drop is insane. It went from 2.9 million queries in 2021 down to just 7,413 in 2025.
Which is a massive shift. And the mechanics of those 2024 reforms are crucial to understand here.
How so?
Well, before FISA, almost anyone in the FBI could run a query through that 702 database with very little friction.
It's typing in a name.
Pretty much. But the 2024 reforms implemented strict internal gatekeeping. They required high-level supervisory approval, they mandated strict audit trails, and they forced agents to log specific justifications before they could even type an American's name into that search bar.
So the bureaucratic friction is what drove the numbers down.
Precisely.
But wait, if the queries dropped by over 99% in just 4 years, doesn't that inherently prove the system was being massively abused before 2024?
That is exactly the point the critics are making.
I mean, if a surveillance system required a 99% correction rate, how can the public trust that the new gatekeepers aren't just going to quietly revert to rubber stamping things once the spotlight fades?
And that structural flaw is exactly what the opposition zeroes in on. Representatives Tlaib, Jamie Raskin, and Zoe Lofgren, they view Section 702 not as a precise foreign intelligence tool, but as a domestic mass surveillance dragnet.
Yeah, Tlaib notes the tool has historically been used against journalists and Black Lives Matter protesters.
Right. And Raskin goes further, calling this 3-year extension a permission slip for the Trump administration to abuse privacy rights. He directly mocks the underlying premise that we should rely on intelligence agencies to just, self-report their own compliance violations.
But despite all that pushback, when the roll is called, the bill passes. It gets 235 yeas to 191 nays.
So the surveillance continues for 3 more years.
Right. But this divide over boundaries, it isn't just about the digital borders of our privacy. It bleeds right into the physical soil of the country.
Which brings us to H.R. 7567, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026.
Otherwise known as the Farm Bill.
Exactly. Representative G.T. Thompson, one of its main backers, points out that farmers are basically suffocating under their 3rd consecutive Farm Bill extension.
You need some predictability.
Right. They need a permanent, updated framework to solidify the farm's safety net and to shift international programs like Food for Peace fully under the USDA's jurisdiction.
But this isn't just about crop rotation and tractors, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Representative Jim McGovern takes the floor and completely tears into the bill.
Yeah.
Primarily because it slashes nearly $200 billion from SNAP.
The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps.
Right. He argues this cut reduces food assistance to barely over $6 a day for vulnerable families, all to offset tax breaks for billionaires.
He also claims the bill provides regulatory cover for chemical companies like Monsanto to just dump toxins into the environment.
It gets really heated.
It does. And the conflict here really exposes the structural reality of how omnibus bills function.
Okay, break that down for us.
So McGovern points out a procedural maneuver happening in the background. There is a completely separate bill, H.R. 1346, which allows the year-round sale of E15 gasoline.
That's gas with a 15% ethanol blend, right?
Exactly. And under the parliamentary rules laid out for this session, if the E15 bill passes, it gets automatically stapled to the end of the Farm Bill before being sent to the Senate.
So the Farm Bill isn't actually a cohesive farming policy.
Not at all.
It sounds less like a farming policy and more like a legislative Thanksgiving turkey.
A Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, it's stuff with everything from precision satellite technology to ethanol fuel mandates, and everyone is just fighting over who gets the wishbone.
That is actually a perfect analogy. Nobody likes everything in the package. Some members hate the S&P cuts, others hate the ethanol mandates, others hate the pesticide regulations.
But leadership bundles them all together so that pulling out the one piece you hate destroys the entire deal.
Exactly. It forces members to vote yes on provisions they despise just to secure the vital agricultural funding their local districts desperately need. They build.
Representative Austin Scott introduces this one as well. It prohibits any public elementary or middle school that receives federal funding from changing a child's name, pronoun, or locker room access without the parent's consent.
And the opponents immediately label this a targeted culture war attack that demonizes transgender youth.
But functionally, looking at this, the federal government doesn't employ a national school police force to stand in hallways and monitor how middle schoolers talk to each other. How do they actually enforce this?
Well, they don't need a police force. They use the power of the purse.
The funding.
Exactly. Local school districts rely heavily on federal grants to keep the lights on, pay for special education, run school lunch programs.
Oh, wow. So by attaching these specific social mandates to the federal funding pipeline, the government forces the states, the superintendents, and the local principals to become the enforcers.
Yes. If a school defies the rule, they risk having massive amounts of federal aid instantly frozen. It is a top-down financial lever designed to force local compliance.
It's legislating local social dynamics through the threat of federal bankruptcy.
That's exactly what it is.
Which naturally brings us to the biggest financial lever of the day, which is SCON Res 33.
Right, the budget resolution for fiscal year 2026. And this sets the spending framework all the way through 2035.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the actual numbers inside this budget are almost secondary to the parliamentary mechanism it activates, right?
So completely. Representative Jody Arrington explicitly states that passing this budget resolution is necessary to unlock something called budget reconciliation.
We hear reconciliation thrown around on the news constantly, but what is it mechanically doing to the chamber?
So normally the Senate operates under the filibuster. That means you need 60 votes to advance almost any piece of legislation.
Which, in a highly polarized country, is nearly impossible.
Right. Getting 60 votes is a massive hurdle. But under the rules of the Congressional Budget Act, bills that strictly adjust federal spending, revenues, or the debt limit can be passed using budget reconciliation.
And that bypasses the filibuster.
Exactly. It completely bypasses the filibuster, it limits debate, and it requires only a simple majority of 51 votes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when the House passes this budget resolution, they are basically handing the Senate majority the master key to bypass the minority party entirely.
And Arrington is very clear about what they intend to do with that master key. He wants to fully fund immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Protection through 2029.
Right. He states this is to fulfill President Trump's campaign promises to secure the border and deport violent illegal aliens.
And the opposition.
They respond by pointing to the collateral damage of this funding strategy. Representatives McGovern and Brendan Boyle highlight that while the majority is moving heaven and earth to fund ICE through reconciliation, essential agencies like FEMA and the Coast Guard remain shut down.
Yeah, they place the blame squarely on Speaker Johnson for refusing to take up bipartisan Senate compromises that would fund those emergency agencies.
McGovern actually summarizes the entire slate of bills on the floor that day as a, quote, greatest hits album of MAGA extremism.
So this monumental, decade-long financial framework, which holds the keys to border enforcement and emergency management, it comes down to the absolute wire.
The vote was incredibly close.
It passes 215 yeas to 211 nays, with one member voting present.
A 4-vote margin.
A 4-vote margin is deciding a multi-trillion-dollar trajectory.
It's wild to think about, and while the House is squeezing these massive polarizing packages through by the skin of their teeth, if we look across the Capitol dome to the Senate, we see a completely different mechanical failure.
The Senate does get some baseline work done, right? They confirm Robert Cicada as the director of the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Yes, and Senator Chuck Schumer also announces a joint initiative with former Attorney General Eric Holder to shield the 2026 midterms from election threats.
But the dominant story in the Senate chamber on April 29th is just weaponized gridlock.
The transcript here is honestly staggering. Senator Rand Paul single-handedly stops almost 20 bipartisan commerce bills from moving forward.
We are talking about major national legislation here. including the Kids Off Social Media Act and the AM Radio Act.
He just puts up a wall.
How does 1 out of 100 senators have the structural power to paralyze the other 99?
It's due to a mechanism called unanimous consent.
Okay, how does that work?
So the Senate rules normally require endless hours of debate, cloture motions, and procedural votes for every single bill. To avoid spending 6 months on routine paperwork, the Senate agrees to pass non-controversial bills unanimously, skipping the debate process.
Which makes sense for efficiency.
It does. But that means any single senator can stand up, object, and force the chamber back into the agonizing slow-motion procedural process.
Oh, I see.
Because there simply isn't enough time on the legislative calendar to debate 20 bills normally, objecting effectively kills them.
And Senator Paul isn't objecting because he necessarily hates the AM Radio Act. He explicitly states he is using this procedural blockade as leverage for a hyperlocal issue in Kentucky.
Right. He wants to grant a property deed to a Boys and Girls Club in Paducah.
He is holding 20 national bills hostage for a single local deed.
Yes. And this raises an important question about how you, as a citizen, engage with this system.
Because it is incredibly easy to look at a 4-vote margin on a $1 trillion budget or a single senator paralyzing the chamber and just feel entirely helpless.
Completely. But gridlock is often a feature, not a bug. It is designed to slow the machine down so the public can read the fine print, and the record gives you the exact tools to do that.
Right, because once that E15 ethanol mandate is stapled into the Farm Bill, your representative can hide behind the hostage exchange. They can say, well, I had to vote for the toxic stuff to get the farm subsidies for our district.
Precisely. If you go to congress.gov right now, you can read the raw text of S1318, the FISA extension. You can look at the exact wording of the 56 FBI reform.
And you can hold them accountable.
Exactly. More importantly, you can track exactly how your specific representative voted on that 215-211 budget resolution. When a massive framework passes by 4 votes, your representative was likely the deciding factor.
The transcript also lists upcoming committee schedules, like the Armed Services and Intelligence meetings.
And that's where you actually intervene.
You don't call your representative after the Farm Bill is on the floor. You call them when it's in committee, before the hostage exchange is finalized. You have to track the procedural flags being planted during those morning 1-minute speeches.
Democracy at this scale is heavily bureaucratic, but it is also highly legible if you know where to look.
Very true.
And to close out this stack of sources, there's one final detail buried in the Senate record that I think perfectly captures the tension of this entire day.
Oh, Senator Michael Bennett's resolution.
Yes. Senator Bennett of Colorado brought up a resolution, SJ Res 139, which ultimately failed 46-52.
And the resolution was an attempt to challenge the EPA's disapproval of Colorado's regional haze plan. It's fundamentally a debate about air pollution.
Yes. And it is such a profound concept to end on.
How so?
Well, we spent this entire deep dive looking at rigid boundaries. The strict 2-year legal window for Camp Lejeune victims, the physical border funding for ICE, the digital lines drawn around our metadata in FISA.
Right.
But how does a government effectively legislate something as fluid as the atmosphere? The air, the haze, the pollution, it drifts across state lines continuously without checking in.
But the political authority to regulate it violently stops at the Colorado border.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that we are constantly trying to force linear laws onto a reality that just refuses to stay inside the lines.
A reality that is incredibly messy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us for this special Congress in Context. Focus on this deep dive. Keep pulling the raw text, keep tracking the votes, and we will see you next time.